Afternoon and welcome to the October 28, 2021 meeting of the Library Board of Trustees. We'll call the meeting to order and I'll ask Francesca to call the roll, please.
Trustee Joshi.
Present.
Trustee Moreau.
Present.
Trustee Petty.
Present.
Vice Chair Felguth is absent and Chair Thompson.
Here. And with that, I'd like to ask Francesca to describe the process that the public can use if you'd like to participate on any item on tonight's agenda.
Yes, the City of Monterey seeks to continue to offer virtual methods for public participation in meetings. If you aren't joining us in person here in the council chamber, there are two ways to virtually participate in this meeting. You may join directly on Zoom Gov from your computer or mobile device, or you may call into the meeting. To join the meeting on Zoom Gov using your computer, smartphone, or telephone, use the link or phone number on the agenda at isearchmonterey.org. Since the meeting has started, you'll find the agenda under the Recent tab. To join by telephone, dial toll-free 833-568-8864, enter meeting ID 161-352-8864, and if prompted to enter a participant ID, press pound. Detailed instructions on using Zoom are available at monterey.org/public meetings. To make a public comment using Zoom, click the raise hand symbol on your Zoom toolbar. If you dialed in by phone, raise your hand by pressing *9. These public comments and this meeting is also streamed live on the city's YouTube account, which is accessible at youtube.com/City of Monterey with an approximate 10-second delay, and on Comcast channel 25 with up to a 90-second delay. As always, we look forward to receiving your public comment. And that is the end of the instructions for joining this meeting virtually.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Well done. The first item on our agenda today is our consent agenda, which for today's meeting includes item 1, the approval of minutes from the September 23 board meeting, and item 2, a request to appropriate donated funds in the fiscal year 21-22 library trust fund budget. So first, I'd like to ask if Inga has any additional comments on either of these items, or if any of the trustees have any clarifying questions before we ask for any public input.
I don't have any additional comments.
Okay, Marcia.
I had a clarifying question on the request from the trust fund. I understand the request is for $23,000 and you've got the breakdown, but under the, and I'm trying to figure out where what am I missing? There's 8,000. It comes up to 15, and I'm trying to figure out where it's for collections. You asked for 5,000, and then under collections on the table, it's 13,000, and I'm trying to figure out where I lost the 8,000.
Okay, so
you know what I'm saying? So page 8 and page 9. Page 8 has the table that talks about where the appropriated funds.
right, so
Which makes sense.
we're appropriating funds from several different sources, and I'm looking in the discussion to see if it includes. So in addition, so it's under discussion, it's the second full paragraph. During this quarter, the Friends and Foundation raised funds to purchase new library materials through book sales held at the library and book sales on the Amazon website. They also received corporate and private gifts to Monterey Learns earmarked for collections. And then it continues, restricted memorial gift for 300 was made to the trust fund, and then 100 for collections and 200 for new materials. So the 15,000 on the next page, item packet page 9, shows the 15,000 that was received from the Friends for the wish list, and then the balance that then adds up to 23,102 is the other monies that they've received.
Okay, so that's other donations that are just being passed through.
So it's passed through, and it's also the amounts that they raised from Amazon book sales and from their in-person book sales. And I'm sorry that wasn't broken out for you so you could see that exact.
Okay, I just didn't, it just wasn't clear to me. So thank you. Thanks for the clarification, Inga.
So it's not 23 plus 15, it's 23 total, including the 15.
Correct.
Right. Yeah, the 15 was just what was on the wish list.
Yeah,
And
right.
That's just a subset of the entire amount, if I understand it correctly.
That's right.
Yeah, good. Any other clarifying questions? If not, then Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on this, on either item 1 or 2 on the consent agenda?
Yes. We encourage members of the public to join our meeting via Zoom Gov. You will be connected live in real time to the meeting. To join by telephone, please dial toll-free 833-568-8864. Enter meeting ID 161-352-8864, followed by the pound sign. To make a public comment on Zoom, raise your hand. If you are connected by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. At this time, there are no public comments, Chair Thompson.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Any further board discussion on this issue or a motion?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second,
Marcia makes the motion and Bob seconds. Is there any further discussion on the motion? If not, Francesca, could you call the roll?
Trustee Joshi,
Yes.
Trustee Moreau,
Yes,
Trustee Petty,
yes.
Chair Thompson.
Yes. Motion carries unanimously with 4-0 with Trustee Felgus absent. The next item on our agenda is public comments, which is an opportunity for any member of the public to speak on any item that is not on our agenda tonight. Francesca, could you see if there are any public comments?
Sure. To make a public comment on Zoom, please raise your hand. If you are connected by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. There are no public comments at this time.
Very good. Thank you, Francesca. Then we'll move on to the public appearance section of our agenda, which includes items 3 through 9. So we have quite a few interesting items here to discuss, and we'll start with item number 3, the request for the City Council to authorize continuing virtual participation in public meetings as long as it's legally allowed during the pandemic. Inga, do you have any further update on this item or any comments?
Just a reminder that the action that the council took at their meeting a month ago was that they need to renew this action every month. And so we were thinking that it would be very helpful if the board also, as a board, indicated to the council their interest in continuing to have virtual participation as long as possible.
Very good. Thank you. Any clarifying questions before I ask for public input? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public input on item number 3?
Yes, to make a public comment on Zoom, please raise your hand. If you are connected by phone, dial *9. At this time, there are no public comments.
Thank you, Francesca. Any further board discussion of item number 3? If not, would anyone like to make a motion? Bob?
I'll make the motion that we, I move that we request that the City Council authorize continued virtual participation in public meetings for as long as legally allowed during the pandemic, consistent with the letter that I wrote and the one that Jim and Jennifer submitted to the City Council recently as well. So I move we authorize, request that they authorize that.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Bob made the motion and Harish seconded. Is there any further discussion of the motion? If not, Francesca, could you call the roll?
Trustee Joshi,
Yes.
Trustee Moreau,
yes,
Trustee Petty,
Yes.
and Chair Thompson.
Yes. Motion carries unanimously among the 4 trustees present.
The question is it our understanding, Inga, that if the city council each month authorizes continued use of the remote procedures, then that will provide a blanket approval for all boards and committees and commissions in the city.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay,
Very good.
So I
and
guess
that goes until January 1 of 2024, unless the governor changes his mind.
correct. And then my question would be, now that you've taken this action, are we going to have the chair prepare a statement on behalf of the board to then submit to the council?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea, whether to do that at for this next meeting or wait until it seems like it's a little more iffy whether the council might approve it. I might wait, but I would welcome the counsel of the director on when might be the best time to do it. I mean, I could do it for every time they consider it, but that may be a bit of overkill, I think.
I would inform them of the motion we just approved the first time they do it.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And in doing that, say, and we expect this to continue until the end of the state regulation.
So
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Harsha.
Is there a timetable for the board, for the council's actions?
They have to do it every month, every 30 days. So it kind of depends on the schedule of their own meetings. So sometimes they may have to do it more often than every 30 days to meet the 30-day criteria. So I don't think they'll do it at every meeting, but they might. But they'll be doing it quite frequently in any case.
So does that mean we also have to do it every 30 days?
No. They are doing it on behalf of not only the council, but all the boards and commissions. So, and basically the boards and commissions don't really have a choice. They're doing it for us and instead of us. So we're basically bound by the city council's action, as I understand it.
We're just letting them know our preference in supporting their decision to continue it.
Right.
And it next goes before them on November 2nd.
Okay, so I'll work with Inga on preparing a letter to send to them on behalf of the entire board, but coming from me as the chair.
That would be great.
I think just almost a reiteration of the statement that we voted approval on that was in our agenda packet. Doesn't have to be too lengthy because there's lengthy documentation already, including 2 letters from, even though we weren't writing on behalf of the board, there were 2 letters representing the views of 3 of the 5 of us as individuals. So make it easy, Jim. I would just do that one statement that was the motion.
Okay, well, I'll play it by ear at this point. I need to think it through a little bit more. Because we might reattach the same letter at future times as well, possibly, or maybe a different letter if we think there's some question about it being continued. I think our board probably feels more strongly about this issue than some of the other boards and commissions do, is my impression. But I may be wrong on that. Okay, moving on to item number 4 then, to receive an update on the library reopening. Could you give us a bit of an overview of that, Inga?
Sure. So just as a reminder, on July 27th, the library opened after 500 days of closure, and we opened following the library reopening plan that had been approved by the board and worked on by a ad hoc subcommittee, but had been approved by the board back in May of 2021. So we reopened. And then you received a report in August about how we were doing. And so we thought it was a good time to give you another update to just let you know how some of the things are going in our reopening. And I want to point out an error in my reporting of numbers on packet page 24. For item number 7, I talk about visits. And it's the second line down in item 7, where I say, nevertheless, 9,142 visitors in September is only 57% of the 21,429 visitors that used the library in September of 2019. But of course, 9,142 is just 43%. So if you could change the 57% to 43%. And so then I'll just quickly walk you through the things that we reported on. So our PPE, personal protective equipment, seems to be holding up well. Kim did a great job in ordering wipes and hand sanitizer that are sprinkled around throughout the library. And we also have masks at each entrance. And those were so popular that we had to put a sign saying, just take one per day, please. Our students, people were wondering how we're being impacted by students. So students have returned now that school is back in session. And the no food or drink policy is a little bit challenging to enforce for them because, of course, traditionally, teenagers are hungry after they get out of school. So when we notice them, we direct them to the terrace where they can eat by taking off their masks, or the back patio is another place for them to go. But they do, of course, escape our notice sometimes. So that's a little bit of a challenge. Meeting rooms, we haven't reopened our meeting rooms yet. And that's one of the things we plan to include in our survey, which is later in the agenda. So we want to know how comfortable people would be if we reopened our meeting rooms again. As far as programs are going, our virtual programs are very successful. And our in-person children's program, which is the story time, has been very successful as well. It's been out on Colton Hall lawn, but it's getting a little too cold for that. And so we are going to be bringing those indoors, but rather than having them in an enclosed room, the community room, they are going to be in the picture book area where people can spread out and the windows will be open. We'll try that out. And then we have a couple other kids programs. One is a Legos building program, which will be outdoors, but if the weather is poor, we'll bring it indoors. And also there's a book discussion that I'm looking at Kim. Kim, was that on the terrace? Is that where we had planned to have it?
Yeah, it's on the terrace.
Yeah, and then, so hopefully the weather will be good for that as well. Our adult book group attendance has been very small. Now, in a book discussion, you don't want to have 30 people because, of course, you want everybody to have a chance to talk and interact with one another. But our numbers have been small, so we're kind of keeping an eye on that to see. And this, once we have our survey results, it might be indicative that adults are not all that comfortable gathering together yet. Fines have been restored. And I believe, so they began again on October 1st. We haven't had a big outcry about that. I think David told me that we've collected about $92 in fines. And of course, down the road, we're really going to have to look at the whole issue of collecting fines because so many libraries throughout our state and now in other states as well are eliminating fines. And part of it is because they see it as a barrier, they see it as a equity issue where those who have less are not able to pay their fines. So then they wind up losing out on accessing the library. And those who can easily afford to pay their fines and continue using the library. So it is a big question that other libraries have tackled. And at this point, with our resources the way they are, it just didn't seem like a good time for us to be eliminating fines. So we reinstated those. The book bundle program, which Kim launched, which is where people can actually fill out on a form what books they would like collected for them, and then they just pick up that bundle. It was really successful when we were offering sidewalk service. The numbers have dropped now that we're no longer offering sidewalk service, but we want to continue offering it. And it is something that we've done in a less formal way in the past. People will ask us, what books can you find for a 5-year-old who's experiencing loss of a pet or something like that. And then we gather those things together. So might as well have it in a form that we get ahead of time, and staff can work on it, and we can route it to a person who's more expert in whatever the kind of bundle is that the person wants. The self-checkouts. So even though the total number of borrowing hasn't changed significantly from last month when we looked at it, the percentage of checkouts that are occurring on the self-checkout machines has gone up. And then sidewalk service remains fairly underutilized, but again, we're going to include questions about that in our survey to see, how, if there's some people that wouldn't be able to be served if we weren't offering that service. So these were just the things that I had remembered we discussed, but there might be other questions about reopening or questions about what I've reported on. So I'm happy to take questions.
Good, thank you. Excuse me. Thank you for that overview, Inga. Are there any clarifying questions that anyone has before I ask for public input? Marcia.
I had two questions. First of all, does the self-check include the phone app? Because you said the machines, but it's the machines and people using their phones for self-check?
So I didn't lump the patron app into these numbers.
Oh, so it's possible that self-check is higher because of the patron app being
Yeah.
so.
At this point, our patron app use is not very high, and I'm convinced that's because we haven't done enough to promote it.
Mm.
And so I've tasked David to task Carl to make a video just about using the app. And he did a great job. Carl did a great job recently about our RFID in general, so I'm sure he'll do a good job with how to use the app. We're going to keep it very brief so that we can use it in social media, and we can also post it to our website. And people have short attention spans these days, I've heard, so we want to keep it brief, but we think we'll get more usage that way.
Right. Okay. And my second question was, do you know if the other libraries on the peninsula are charging fees? Or are we right in there, or are we the only ones?
That's a great question.
Fines. I'm sorry, fines, not fees.
Fines. So the Carmel Public Library got rid of their fines a couple of years ago. And then I'm looking at Kim to see if she can help me out here. The county library, I think, has eliminated some of their fines. I think maybe children's fines.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, and then Pacific Grove was very reluctant to reintroduce fines because of the equity issues, and also they didn't have a way to collect fines for quite a while at their location. But just to be consistent, they're going to be reintroducing fines at this point as well.
Bob, did you have a clarifying question too?
Yeah, a clarifying question. I have this item number 4 on our agenda was the one that I have the most interested in, lots and lots of notes, but I'll save most of that for our discussion after we invite public input. But the one clarifying question I have then, because I want to talk about the fines later, is Inga, did you say that the either absolute number or percentage of checkouts that were the self-checkouts was increasing? Because in item 8 on packet page 24, it talks about it being less than before.
Well, increasing compared to last month.
Oh, just month to month.
Right.
Correct.
But it's still correct that it's less. And in item 8 here, you talk about how can we get, basically, we're going to brainstorm how to get more people to use it. And I have some comments on that, but I want to make sure I was understanding the, the relative numbers you were talking about.
Right. So the numbers are going up compared to how they were last month and the previous month, but they aren't at the level that they had been before our closure.
but we can talk about that after we invite public comment. I just want to make sure I clarified that for myself.
Good. Any other clarifying questions? If not, then Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item number 4?
Yes, to make a public comment on Zoom, please raise your hand. If you are connected by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. At this time, there are no public comments, Chair Thompson.
Okay, thank you, Francesca. Then moving on to discussion of this item. Bob, did you want to start?
Well, yeah, I'll throw out a few of the things I have here and then try to let some other people have a word in edgewise too. Since the question of fines was already brought up, I'll mention that first. And since it is the library board's responsibility and duty to set up the regulations for how the library operates, and that would include setting or having or not having fines. The idea that it would be a way of bringing in more revenue to the city, I think the amount, even over the course of a year, would be so small that maybe Inga knows off the top of her head what the total was back when we were collecting fines. That was at least several years ago, because there was even before COVID, I think we had stopped collecting fines. But at any rate, I don't think we're going to be out much money. I don't think we'll gain much money by reinstating them. And besides the equity issue, which is not a small issue at all, I think it's worth the PR, or it's worth avoiding the bad PR to not have the fines. And it's not going to make a dent one way or the other, I don't think, in the city's revenues. And I would particularly like us to cease having the library fines, the late book, the dues. So I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that before I go to something else.
I'd like to.
Reese, go ahead.
Is there a difference in the number of books being returned late when fines are there versus they're not there? Has it acted as a deterrent? Have things come back on time?
Right, so that's a good question. I did want to say that we didn't stop collecting fines before library closure. We stopped because of library closure. It's a little hard to judge how quickly things were returned when we stopped charging fines, because we kept extending the loan period for materials for quite some time, because we were closed and we weren't able to collect even the materials initially. And then we started collecting them and they were quarantined, as you'll recall. So a lot of people kept things out for a very long time. So it wasn't a very good sample of how quickly things are returned. Now, when you read studies, other libraries have found that there hasn't been an impact on how quickly things are returned when fines are removed. And I believe that that Carmel had actually made a statement to that effect, that they didn't notice that things were kept longer.
I'd offer another comment, which is I'm certainly open to the question that Bob's highlighted here. And it strikes me that maybe that would be appropriate to consider when we get the report on diversity related issues. It seems to me it kind of fits within that general framework. And my suggestion would be to deal with it as part of that, if that makes sense. Would you have any comment on that, Inga?
I agree. I think that's a good idea. That the idea with the diversity plan is that you then have something you can use to apply as a lens to the policies that you have and the practices you have, to see if the policies and procedures that you're using are actually discriminating against some folks. So I think that's a good time to take up that issue.
Do we have any feel for the time frame on when that overall concept would come forward?
Right, we're working on that, and I'll have more to report, not today, but I can report on that in December.
Okay.
I
Other
think just in general, since we, like Linda pointed out, that's, I guess, what I was confusing with cutting off the fines. By lengthening the time that people could sort of legally keep the book to 3 weeks,
Yes.
that makes it less likely they're going to be late. If it was only 2 weeks, then they might go, oops, it's been 15 days. But if they have 3 weeks, and I can say this from personal experience, I thought, oh my gosh, this book's sitting on my table here at home. It must be overdue by now. And I look and it's still, I got 4, 5, 6 days to go because it's a 3-week book. So if we're going to keep the 3 weeks, and I assume we will, I don't think there's really any need to generate the possibility of negative PR by also having fines. Because I just don't think it'll happen very much.
And just to respond quickly to what you mentioned previously, Trustee Petty, the amount that we collect in fines has decreased over time, even though the amount that we charge per day per item did increase over the past 10 years. The amount that we take in is right around, I believe, $20,000, $25,000 in that range. And it is money that it's considered revenue, and it goes into the general fund as opposed to other fees that we charge, for instance, the copy machines and scanning. That amount is revenue that goes into the trust fund.
Okay, other comments on the reopening report?
I had one question. So there's actually going to be an in-person authors book talk. I think I saw there somewhere. Is that out publicized? And
That's the Friends and Foundation are very anxious to resume their author lecture series, and they have a lot of really talented authors to choose from. And so they are offering a outdoor book talk and book signing in November 6th.
I see, but it's not on our library website. Maybe it's on theirs.
Right. It's not a library city event. It's the Friends and Foundation event.
Okay. Thank you.
It is, yeah.
Any other comments? Bob, did you have more?
Yeah, if we were, I mean, this is a small thing, but if we were concerned about not many people, although Inga said it was more this month than last month, but if we're concerned about there still being a lot of people waiting in line to get their books checked out instead of using the new self-check. And she mentioned that Dave said maybe it's hidden in plain sight and it's just, they don't notice it. And she says on item 8 on packet page 24, adding a string of lights to a sign that hangs above them. I would like to suggest not a string of lights, but a sign, or especially if it has lights on it, but a sign easily seen that says, quick checkout, do it yourself, or something like that, so that they are directed to those 2 machines to the right of the reference desk there, and label them quick checkout, because no matter how efficient our staff are in checking books out for somebody, it's easy just to walk up there and slide your cart and slide the book, and it happens so fast that a lot of times when I start to slide the book, it's already recorded it on the screen before I think I've slid it in far enough to be read, the barcode. So I think if we just put something up there, it says quick checkout, do it yourself, that might attract more people. And I would suggest that because that is so easy to do, that might be one reason why the app hasn't been used as much, because frankly, it hasn't been busy. There aren't long lines at the self-checkout, and it's easy just to go up there and go zip, 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 and you're done in 20 seconds. And the app might even take longer. Not that I wouldn't use it if there was a long line and I was in a hurry, and it does work. I tried it once I first downloaded it, so it worked great. And just like those things there, you practically, wave the book over it without even aiming it at the barcode, and it reads it. So it's a fantastic system. But something like saying quick checkout, do it yourself might attract more people there if that's a concern.
Yeah, David had said that when a person walks in, if they look over to where they remember the self-checks being, and they don't
Sure.
see them there, then they focus on the desk and their eyes don't continue to search for where might the machines have.
I think that's totally what happens. And so that's why I think a additional sign that's big, that's by those new machines, that somehow grabs their attention and tells them this is a good way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Quick, I like the idea of quick, encouraging people, you know, like, oh, it's not just a place to do it, but it's a better place to do it. Because it's
Yeah.
quick.
Okay, any other comments on the reopening report? Harish?
I haven't seen any signs in the library about downloading the app and how to use it. There's nothing there. So even if somebody would do it, if they're not aware of it, unless they've looked at the website or something like that, they're not going to know.
Mm-hmm. So signs as well. That's a good idea, especially in the stacks. If a person looks at it and they have a handful of books, they can download it and check them out right there.
Mhm.
And the sign doesn't have to be, the signs can be anywhere that you get the books or the material. It doesn't have to be in the checkout line. The other comment I have is that, yes, there is a sign when you come into the help desk. There's a sign that says check out this way, but it's a very small sign. I'm gonna set myself as you walk towards the help desk. There's a standalone sign, and it's easy to ignore.
You were cutting out for me, and so which sign is it? What does the sign say?
About the self-checkout,
Oh,
as you come into the help desk, there's a sign, self-checkout this way, but it's a very small typeface. It's not something that hits you as you walk in. You're looking at the help desk person and not really paying attention to the sign because you know what the sign is going to say, help desk. And so you ignore the sign. So that's my experience. I watched the people come in and they don't even read the sign. They don't just this. They go straight to the person there.
yes. So I know over the self-check machines, there's a very large sign that says checkout. And so we thought, and over the help desk, there's a big, large circular sign that says welcome. So we were hoping that those who read signs would see that to check out, you use the machines. But I agree that signage could be improved. We'll have to work on that.
Signage with lights, that's both. Right?
Well, the key thing is to put it where they'll notice it, because I don't know how many of you shop at Costco, but I do. And when I'm walking from the rear of the store toward the front where the cashiers are, they now have self-checkout places. You don't have to wait in line, and it's fantastic. And as you're wheeling your cart toward the front, it's a long distance, right? And there are big signs hanging down from the ceiling that say self-checkout over here. That's kind of what gave me the idea of telling people to come to our machines for checking out the book. But you can see it from a distance. And long before I'm looking level, I'm looking a little bit up because it's a distance. And I see this thing, and I go there every time now. And if you have something at Costco, if you have something super heavy, you don't want to lift out a case of bottles or something, they have staff there that'll do it for you. So it's an easy thing, but the notification is very easily seen.
Okay, any other? I think we've beaten the horse of the signage pretty well now.
Yeah.
Any other comments?
Jim, are we going to talk, this mostly of what we've been talking about is the phase 2 initial access. Are we going to talk today, or are you going to wait until maybe next month to talk about phase 3, the expanded access that is scheduled to start in January? Is that for today or later?
I'd be interested in Inga's comments on that, but my sense of it is that's probably for later. What do you think, Inga?
Yeah, I think this was just primarily covering where we were now. And I think that our survey is actually going to influence what happens in the latter half of the year, in addition to our phase 3 plan.
Phase 3 is January to June, so we're talking about the first 6 months of next year.
Mhm.
And a lot of it on our diagram here shows, advancement and changes to the stuff that's in the middle column, which is right now. So, but if you want to wait and talk about the future effective January, I didn't want to bring up anything that was, sort of off the game plan for today.
Yeah, I think hold that. And, I'm not sure exactly when we'll be able to get the survey done, because I think we want to take that into account as well as some of the data that we're already gathering before really deciding what changes to make in the next phase. So my guess is it might slip a little bit from January 1, but January 1's a good goal, but we may or may not make that for our next phase. I don't know. That's my sense of it. Would you agree with that, Inga, or you really think we can make it?
I mean, the things that will go into effect January 1 are the positions that we're going to have. That will be happening. But other than that, yeah, I think we're going to have to get our feedback from the survey, and probably won't be, it will be, if the survey is approved in December, then it'll be, we'll still be getting results back in January.
Right.
Inga, you mentioned positions. Did I read somewhere, and I can't find it right now, but did I read somewhere in our agenda packet where you noted we would be losing a librarian position?
So I mentioned that for our Bookmobile, and also I'm not quite sure where it's mentioned, but anyway, we have a couple of part-time seasonal folks who work hourly who are retired annuitants.
Yeah.
And the city is phasing out those retired annuitant positions. And so our backup Bookmobile driver, who had formerly been a full-time employee of ours, will stop working for us December 31st. And also the librarian who's been doing our story times.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah, she'll be, she won't be continuing after December 31st either. So we're going to.
Are we losing the position or just that person who is the annuitant?
The person who's working those hours. So
Not
that's
the position.
Right.
Okay.
That's in my work plan update. It's come to me now. And so I mentioned that we'll be doing some recruitments.
Yeah,
Good.
so
I just want to make sure we weren't losing the position. And if there's a rule about not hiring a retired annuitant, it's just that individual. It's not the position itself.
Correct.
Right. So Inga will need to fill those positions as well as the additional staffing that's authorized starting in January in the second phase of the budget for this fiscal year. So you have a couple of positions to deal with, right?
And the administrative support for fund development.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Any other comments? I actually have one myself, but any other trustees have comments on the reopening report before I make a quick comment?
I'll just say real quick, it refers to the installing of the sneeze guards in there. And I say, they don't work at all. I still sneeze just as often as I did before.
Very good, Bob. The comment I wanted to make was, Inga mentioned before that in terms of some of the numbers that are the number of visitors for the month of September of this year was only 43% of September of 2019. But if you look at the circulation numbers, the circulation in September was 71% of the September 2019. So I think, I'm not certain, but a supposition I would have is that while we have fewer visits, part of that is because we're open fewer hours and fewer days of the week, but we're getting more circulation perhaps per hour than we used to. So the people that are seriously wanting to check out a book are finding a way to the library more than perhaps people that just wanted to visit and perhaps read a magazine or use the Wi-Fi or whatever it might be. But that's just a guess on my part. And the second comment I wanted to make was that I think with our new RFID gates that we're gathering a lot of data. And when we do get to the point where we want to kind of rethink what days of the week we're open and what hours we're open, I just wanted to make sure that we're keeping that data. I mean, we should be getting a wealth of data by the hour, by the day, anything like that, if I understand it correctly. And I just wanted to make sure that we're capturing and keeping that data so that maybe, as we're looking at next year's budget, that we can look at some of that data in a fair amount of detail if we want to rethink the hours that we're operating. Can you give me that assurance, Inga, that we're capturing and keeping that data so we can analyze it later?
We know that we're capturing it because I did ask David for numbers on what were the busiest days of the week and so forth. So I know that we have that, and I will just verify with him that it's being retained.
Good. Okay. If nothing else on that item, we ready to move on? I think we are. Okay, good. And there's no action required on this, so there's no motion necessary. We're just receiving and discussing the report. And the next one is also receiving a report, but on this one, there might be suggestions. And the next one is receiving the update from the Hoc Survey Committee on a potential reopening survey. And unfortunately, our Hoc Survey Committee of Jennifer is not here today, but Inga has been working closely with Jennifer on this. And Inga, could you give a bit of an overview of the survey?
Sure. So we wanted to give people a period of time to kind of get adjusted to how we're currently providing services, but we're very interested in learning from from the community about how well we're doing so that we can make adjustments and we can add their requests or their hopes into our future planning. Because it's really important to us that what we're doing is as responsive as possible within our parameters to what the community wants. So we came up with a list of the areas that we thought we should be asking customers about, and maybe people that aren't currently customers. So we'll try to include people that aren't coming to the library in our survey. But we want to know, what areas would you in particular want to make sure we were asking about? So we have hours and days. We know we've talked about sidewalk service before, and we want to know about that. Because we have fewer staff on the floor now, we want to know if customers are feeling that they're not getting the service that they need. Want people's impressions about cleanliness, and we've removed so much of the seating. We want to know what people say about that. So whether or not we should be adding some more seating back in. And then because the collections, of course, have suffered because of not having funds to purchase as many things, what are people thinking about that? We don't have all of our computers up. We haven't even restored the in-library circulation of laptops. So like some feedback about public computers. Meeting rooms is a big issue because, of course, the Friends would really like to have gatherings again in the community room, but we're just not sure about the level of interest that the community has in having those sorts of gatherings. And then the Bookmobile, since we're just operating in half of the stops we had before, want to know if there are some people. I just was talking to a neighbor who bemoaned the fact that the Bookmobile doesn't stop on Surfway anymore. And so I mentioned to them sidewalk service and also the Montecito Park stops, and they didn't seem to be aware of sidewalk service. So, so those are the things that we had thought about. Also, if people are interested in reserving meeting rooms, we'd like to know about that. And the continuance of virtual programs. So for adults, those virtual programs seem to be very well attended, but just to get some feedback about that. So what are we missing, or what should we drill down into further?
Yeah, and maybe before we get into that, we should start with clarifying questions and public input, and then we can have more direct board discussion. So are there any clarifying questions to start?
Maybe you're not there yet, but I was interested in what kind of scale, you're gonna have like a 1 to 5 or rated from 1 to 10 or whatever. I didn't know if you had given that thought, but I think it's important to think about that. So I mean, I'm sure the committee will give it some thought, but I think you want to be pretty clear about what each rating means, and then you'll get better data. So
Yeah.
I don't know, had you thought about that yet, or are you not there yet?
We haven't discussed it together. I've done some reading about surveys where they specify, instead of just, please comment on sidewalk service or staff assistance, satisfied to very satisfied. Instead you ask a specific, have you found the staff to be helpful? And then have a range, because then
have room for comments on it somewhere so people can actually write things. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, good. Any other clarifying questions at this point? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment or public input on this item?
did Trustee Petty have a?
No, I can come back. I'll do it later.
Okay.
To make a public comment on Zoom, please raise your hand. If you are connected by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. There are no public comments, Chair Thompson.
Thank you, Francesca. Then moving on to discussion of the survey. Bob, did you want to start?
Well, it says here in our packet, the survey will summarize reopening and ask customers to rate their level of satisfaction in the following areas. Ask customers, well, I guess what I'm wondering is, how are we going to distribute the surveys and collect it or make it available to people? Because I think we want to get, asking customers taken literally means we will only present them with the survey when they come to the building.
Right.
But I think we want to know how the public feels, whether they are currently a regular patron of the library or not. So I'm just curious what, if any, yet plans have been made for soliciting and gathering the responses.
Mm-hmm. So we haven't fine-tuned that plan, but you're right. It shouldn't say customers, it should say the public. I think surveys typically can serve more than one function, and one function is simply to help get the word out that the library is open, because it seems like there's still people that aren't quite sure that the library is open, or if they vaguely have an awareness that the library is open, they're not sure what services the library is providing. So we were planning to have it be available online. So there would certainly be, it would be on our webpage. We would use our social media to get the word out about the survey, but also the city has been very good about including in their, and it would be in our e-blast that we send out to 8,000 people. And then the city would include it in one of their daily e-blasts as well.
Because we don't want to just ask people, how satisfied are you with the reopening? We want to ask people who may or may not have come to the library since reopening, what would you like? We're interested in what would you like us to provide, not just how happy are you with what we have offered so far. And that's why I think it needs to be very broadly available.
And we also want to know, why aren't you coming? If the answer is
Exactly.
no, if you haven't been to the library since we reopened in July,
Yeah.
why not? And it could be that some people are just finding different ways that they're satisfied with for meeting the needs that they used to meet with the library. So for instance, I subscribe to Netflix now. So I used to always borrow DVDs with you, but I don't anymore. Something like that. It would be good to know.
That's what I meant. We should ask people, what would you like us to do? Because if they're not coming, then, we'd want to know, well, what are you missing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, other comments on the survey?
I'm not sure how you would word it, but maybe something like, do you find it a welcoming environment, or something about the general atmosphere of the library? Is this a place you want to come to? And if not, why not? Somebody might say, there's too many Wi-Fi signals bouncing around, or the color is wrong, or, I don't know what it would be, but you might get some interesting information. What is it that?
Mm-hmm.
They might say you've removed the self-checkout machines because they haven't looked where the new ones are.
That's right. But anyway, it'd be interesting to hear what they have to say about the general welcoming environment, and it would be nice to hear, oh yes, it's even better than it was before and we love it here. Then we get some good quotes to use. But in either case, I think it'll give you good information.
Yeah, I think that some customers in the past, when we did our facilities surveys, had been reluctant to come because of the customers that they encountered in the library. So,
well, I guess it's something we need to hear if that's what it is.
mm-hmm.
Okay, other comments or suggestions regarding the survey? If not, I had one question, Inga, on the public printing item that's on the list here. I know that we're trying to improve the public printing. Is there any chance that will have happened by the time we do the survey, or unlikely?
It is unlikely that it would have changed, I would say. The ISD has to go over our quotes that we received from the vendor that we prefer, and I think they're a little backed up with some of the other projects that they're rolling out right now. We're going to be moving from a Google environment to a Microsoft environment starting in next month, actually. And I think they kind of have their hands full with that.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, any other comments? Okay, thank you. I think you and Jennifer have captured a lot of good issues here to explore, and we look forward to, I think the intent is for the December board meeting to bring back a draft of the actual survey. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing that. So thank you very much. Moving on to item number 6. This is an exciting item: to receive an update regarding a photo archives collection and provide direction to staff. So could you give us a bit of an overview, Inga? Again, you had a very good report on this, I thought.
Thank you. So I'll kind of cut to the chase right now and tell you, since you've all read this report, that we've been asked by the executor of the state, well, actually his attorney, to submit a letter of a proposal by Friday. And so I said, well, it's going to depend on if the library board says, let's continue moving forward and see if we're selected as the recipient to the collection, or if we're not. So when I say provide direction to staff, that would be one direction that I would like to know. I mean, I'm sure I could go back to the attorney and say, we're just not ready. We have other things that questions, and we're not ready to give you a proposal at this time. But so just to walk you through a little bit of this report. So it's this tremendous opportunity we have to be considered as one of two institutions that might receive the Pat Hathaway collection of about 85,000 images of the Central Coast, historical images. And the focus of Pat Hathaway's collection, as many of us know, is Monterey Bay area. So the life on the bay, the fishing industry on the bay, lots of photographs of rickets, the communities, and so forth. And this was a collection that was amassed over a lifetime. And then Pat Hathaway also was a photographer himself. So he documented the changes to Cannery Row over a 44-year period with photographs as well. So the estate is looking for an institution to receive the collection. And so I laid out some of the information about why we would be a good candidate for the collection. And the Friends and Foundation are excited about this opportunity, and in their wish list, they have donated $10,000 towards this possibility. But if we decide it's not appropriate this time to move forward with it, then we can use those same $10,000 towards the digitization project. I outlined the initial fiscal implications. So about $1,000 for moving the collection from the photographer's home to the library, and then initial costs for indexing using a standard that the University of California uses, which is called MPLP, and it has to do with looking at a collection and saying what's the minimum amount of processing that needs to be done to get this into the hands of the researchers, the students, the educators that are interested in using it. And then some minimal adjustments that we would need to do to the proposed room, which is the quiet study room. So that was the fiscal implications. From my viewpoint, I just see this as such an amazing opportunity. And to me, it just seems, and as David said, David Kuhn, who's our technology specialist, he said, isn't this a once in a lifetime opportunity? Can we really, turn it down? But we could turn it down. But the idea is this such a significant collection, documenting our area. And when you look at our mission statement, when you look at our collection development policy, it definitely ties in with that. It would just be such a large photo collection to receive all at once. So we would need to be, very mindful of the amount of staff time to allocate towards it, and we would have to raise some funds to support our work on it. So then it aligns with our mission. Our city manager is so enthusiastic about it and really sees that it supports the city's focus on heritage tourism, on preserving our history. So many families in our area donated their photograph collections to Pat Hathaway to be part of the collection. So he really sees a great alignment with our city's values and interests. The executor had really three major concerns. One is that it be protected, so it'd be housed in a place that's safe. Two, that it's preserved appropriately, so that the standards, archival standards, are used. And three, that it be accessible, that it not just languish in a basement somewhere, in a storage unit somewhere, never to be seen in our lifetime again, because it's such a massive collection that it would be, a challenge to organize and make accessible. So that's the concern of the executor, and he has a story of a collection that he gave to a university 30 years ago, and it still hasn't been processed. So he wants to avoid that kind of thing. I said that we have the space in our quiet study room to accommodate this collection. So we did measurements at the site, and then measurements in the quiet study room. And the quiet study room is closed right now, and it's an opportunity to kind of rethink how we're using that quiet study room. It's been difficult to keep an eye on. It's been prior to our closure, it was open to the public. And the idea was people who really needed a quiet space could go and use that room. But what would happen is people would go into that room and sort of take over and not make it very welcoming to other customers who wanted to enter. And then there would be disagreements amongst the people using the room. And if staff didn't circulate, regularly past the room and look in and see what was going on, then they weren't able to supervise it very well. And so, it has just been a concern because it's tucked away. Now, if it's tucked away, why would we want to put a valuable special collection in there? Well, we lock, just like the California room has a locked door. This collection would have locked doors and people would have to register to go in and use it. So but it has those windows. And so I can't think of a good example of a museum, but some museums, I've seen this in natural history museums, they have, here's where the processing happens. And you can look into a staff area and see, what's going on in a staff area. So the idea would be the windows that face the stacks, we would probably want to leave so that you can look through from the customer's point of view and see what's going on in the room. Funding, and staffing. So that the city manager did recognize that we would need a full-time position assigned to the California History Room again if we were to take on a collection of this size. Funding, we have some initial funds from the Friends, and I'm thinking this might be an opportunity to sort of focus Friends activities once the current comprehensive campaign ends in February. Then they might want to launch a campaign in support, in particular, especially of the collection where we to receive it. And then I've outlined, did some estimates on processing time and costs, depending on what combination of professional staff, paraprofessional staff, interns, and then volunteers. And so there's a range of what it would cost to process this many linear feet to give it a general index. And speaking of volunteers, it does seem that the Hathaway collection has a big following. There are lots of retired professionals in our community who are familiar with history, who are retired librarians, retired archivists, etc. And even those who aren't retired, who would probably welcome the opportunity to get to work on this collection. So I'm hoping it would be a way to bring the community together through volunteering. And there's also a small possibility that it could generate revenue. So we've talked about alternate ways to generate revenue. And while I would see this more as the role of the Friends to sell off the prints that are already matted and prepared for sale, because Pat would go to various events and have a booth where he could sell prints. So there are those, but then also there would be some income from the way we generate income now with our historic photographs, which is when somebody wants to use some photographs for a book that they're working on and so forth, then we charge a fee for that. So in conclusion, I think that it's a very important collection and it's a very exciting opportunity, but I would like to take questions, clarifying questions, and then eventually have a discussion with you all.
Very good. Thank you for the overview, Inga. Before we ask for public input, are there any clarifying questions? Marcia.
I have two. First of all, so the California History Room, I think we have a full-time person coming on as a historian in January, right?
So we have a full-time librarian position coming on in January. It's a reference / local history position.
Okay, but this room will need another person, right? I mean, because that person, or you're saying it will need another position. And so did we get any kind of commitment from the city that there would be a position forthcoming if we got the collection?
So that would be the next conversation. What I got was just a verbal yes, we would need a dedicated position in our budget for this year,
Right.
including the positions that are coming on in January. There is no dedicated California history room position.
Okay, so just wanted to get that clarification. That's something we need to build into our discussion. And then the other question is, my sense from what I read is that they want this stuff out of there at the end of December because they want to sell the house. And so if we say, oh, well, we can't give you an answer for another couple of months, is there somebody else? You said they asked you to give a proposal. Have they asked other people to propose also, and then they're going to make a decision? Is that the way it works?
Right, so they're considering one other institution.
Okay,
And so what they'd like is a proposal from each of us. In fact, they might have already received the proposal from the other institution.
okay,
And then they want to review those and make a determination. They
Okay.
had also asked, initially they had asked a local university, and that didn't move forward. So
right. But I had a sense that maybe somebody like Berkeley would want the collection. So I guess the question is, there are consequences to not moving forward. It's not that they're going to say, well, we'll wait until March to decide, or something. That
right,
there needs to be a commitment. And it seems to me that the more we miss the deadline by, the less likely it becomes that we're the chosen institution, probably. Okay.
yes.
Just clarifying that. Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions at this point? Harish?
Inga, when you said that we have the space, do you mean we have the space with the proper climate control, or just the space? Does that need to have climate control added to it?
So we have the space, and the climate is stable. So in archival standards, there is, a stable climate is like the first thing that you need. And then you can add a dehumidifier and blinds and so forth. And then, on and on, you can make improvements. But the first thing is just a stable environment.
So I guess what I was getting to is, if they said, here's a collection, you've been chosen, can we take it on December 1?
Yes.
Okay.
We have to move.
Can I just follow up on that? So they have agreed. I mean, will they agree that that's enough of climate control? I mean, has that been settled?
Well, that's in our proposal that will go forward. What the executor had said to me is that, right now it's in a house.
Right, with no air
And-
conditioning, probably. Yeah.
Exactly. And moving it to a room like I've described the temperatures are stable in that room. So it's not as if it'll experience high
Okay.
heat and then,
Right.
extreme cold.
Yeah, and maybe a step up to move it to where it's going. Thank you.
Okay, any other clarifying questions before we ask for public input? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public input on item number 6?
Yes, to make a public comment on Zoom, please raise your hand. If you are connected by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. There are no public comments at this time, Chair Thompson.
Thank you, Francesca. So I've got a few questions. I imagine most of us do. Who would like to begin? Bob?
Yeah, this isn't actually much of a question, but I think the fact that when we the board first were presented with this, and we directed Inga to find out more and everything, I think that indicated that we all felt, or at least the majority of us felt, that it was an extremely worthwhile project to look into. And I think in the agenda packet that was, I frankly didn't read every single word of all of the how to take care of archives document that Inga gave us, but it was very impressive that there were 2 separate sections from the library board policy manual that are directly relevant to this and clearly make it almost our duty to try to take it on, because it basically says that's one of the important things that we, the library, are all about. And then she mentioned that our city manager is very strongly interested in acquiring this, and he's quoted in our agenda packet as saying our commitment, meaning the city's commitment and vision to preserve our historical record, is built into our mission. And I think, it's important that it says we need approval of the city council. Well, I'd be really surprised if after we got any kind of positive feedback from the executor and the city manager has said that publicly, because it's in this agenda packet, that the city council wouldn't be in favor of it too, especially since we already have the space that Inga was just talking about with Harish, and we could actually accept possession of it almost immediately. And beyond the archival work and making it available for researchers in an organized way, instead of just having it sit in a house or in a garage somewhere, I see this as, since we would own it, it would be an excellent opportunity for us to have, we won't be able to show all these photos at one time. There are just too many of them, but we could pull out in some organized way, by theme, by anthology or whatever, a small collection of them and have a rotating display, almost like a little art gallery of these photos, and where they could. And, when we were talking about with G4 about what we could do to the library, it came up that we should have a big screen and have pictures going back and forth up high above the reference desk, if I remember right. Well, now we have a collection of still photos, if we get this, that could be part of that as well, that are moving by. So I think sharing it with the public in those ways, besides making it available for research, would just be, a fantastic feather in our cap.
Very good. Other comments or questions? If not, I've got a couple myself, Inga. One is when you discuss this with the Friends and Foundation Board, did they seem to indicate a high level of interest in working with us on fundraising for the project?
I should say that the board was unanimous in the $10,000 as seed money to go towards this project. And then I spoke with the Fund Development Committee Chair, Bill Wachowski, and he is very interested in fundraising for this.
Good. That was the assurance I was looking for. Thank you. Then a couple of logistical questions. Did you say tomorrow is when you're supposed to get the letter out? And did you say that they might want us or some entity to take over the collection on December 1?
No.
Yeah, I misunderstand that.
Right. So
By the end of the year.
By the end of the year, they would like it transferred by the end of the year. I think that
That's fine.
I was asked, would we be ready to move it by December 1
Okay.
by one of the trustees?
Some of the logistical issues that I think, in addition to the space and the humidifier and some of the things we've already talked about, there may be legal issues. I'm assuming there would be some sort of contract or something where they would turn over the material to us that would perhaps address things like copyright ownership and that kind of thing, to make sure there's no confusion about who owns the material and who can sell pictures and that kind of thing. Would it be your understanding there probably would be some legal agreement that would address some of those things?
So we do a deed of gift when we receive donations, and the city, so we, meaning both museums and California History Room, have an agreement that we've used in the past for donations of collections. But the city has recently, city attorney's office has recently updated a donation agreement that is what we would use, because then it right. So we lay out what our expectations would be with the donation, and then there might be some back and forth with the donor. But yeah, that template is available, and that's the starting point where we would work from.
And just again, from a logistical perspective, often contracts like that need to be approved by the city council. And they would probably need to approve moving forward with this in any case. But since it's a fairly short time frame, it seems to me if we do need an item before the council agenda, it would have to get before them fairly quickly.
Yeah, so it would be an authorization for the city manager to sign a donation agreement with the estate of Pat Hathaway to accept the collection.
Okay, good. So your intent would be to take something along those lines to the council quickly. Okay, very good.
And I should say about the copyright issue. So with photographs, that is a challenge. And again, Pat Hathaway collected these photos over a lifetime, and often people gave him collections, and there's standard language that archival photo collections use about copyright when posting their images and so forth. So because it's possible that somebody could come out of the woodwork about a particular group of photos, and institutions just don't know, and so they have sort of this blanket statement they say.
Can I ask a follow-up to Jim's question about process? So if you need to do something, if they need something tomorrow, can you do it, say, pending approval of our city council or something like that? We put in a proposal and in which you say, I can't really commit to this until, but this is what our board has supported this, and this is what we say, but something, right? So you have to say subject to the approval of our city council or something.
So I took this report and I pulled out the points that we would make in a proposal, and I'm drafting a letter with Nat and Hans.
Oh, okay.
So if this body approves moving forward, then we'll be able to submit that letter, and then from there, if they choose us as the recipient, it will be dependent on the final approval of the council.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Well, I think that covers.
Can I ask, oops, I'm sorry, one more question, and that is, do you have to buy insurance on this collection, or is that covered by the city? I mean, is there any special requirement?
That's a good question. Our insurance of the collection is part of the insurance for the city in general, and it is quite large.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I did want to mention too that there are collections in this large collection of photographs that would be of particular interest to say Pacific Grove, their local history collection, their library's local history collection, and the same with Carmel. And so by our accepting this gift, it's not as if we wouldn't then share copies of those photos that pertain to other institutions, in particular for their collections as well. So although I know that Hans is of the opinion that he wouldn't want to break up the collection, and there are downsides of breaking up a collection like this, because one photographer may have taken photographs of many different communities, and if you break up the collection, then somebody who's researching that photographer has a real hard time having to go from one place to another place to another place to find those photos. So I think the idea is not to break up the collection, but certainly to share it with appropriate institutions.
Okay, well, just to finish my comments, I strongly support moving forward with this, and I would think we probably would look for a motion authorizing Inga to send a letter to the trustee indicating the support of the Board of Trustees of her proposal. Is there anything else that you think, Inga, that you need from the board to make as strong a pitch as you can in the proposal?
Well, I think if it's unanimous, that I would certainly put that in to the proposal.
I will be happy to make the motion.
Go ahead. I think Bob may have a
Oh,
comment
I'm sorry.
first.
Okay.
Well, no, I was going to second her motion because if she hadn't spoken up, I was going to make it. So
Okay.
I think per our agenda packet, we should, I would say we are moving to provide the following direction to staff, which is to create a proposal that you've already been working on, Inga, and include the results of the board's support, and mention, maybe it's also in there, that we have the support of the city manager's office, and that if chosen, it would just be necessary to get the city council's approval. But that we're hot to
So I'll-
trot, and I really think time is of the essence here.
Marcia, did you want to make a motion? You were about
Well,
to.
I'll second Bob's motion. How about that? Because I think he just made a motion.
Was that a motion, Bob?
Well, fine, yeah. I thought Marcia had already done it. So yes,
Is that-
that's what I moved then, to provide that direction.
I'll second it.
Okay, so Bob makes the motion, Marcia seconds. Is there discussion on the motion?
Oh, only that, and I'm sure it'll be fine, but just for our complete awareness, would you send us a copy of the proposal, Inga, that you send to, I guess, Kent Seavey or his attorney?
Mhm.
Yeah, and if it's workable, one suggestion, if you could obtain a letter of support from the city manager, that might be helpful if that's workable.
He actually wanted to co-sign it with me.
I think that's, in this case, I think that's fine.
Okay.
Good.
As long as you say it's coming from the board and you sign it first.
Okay, any other discussion on the motion? If not, Francesca, could you call the roll?
Yes, trustee Joshi,
I support.
trustee Moreau,
Yes.
trustee Petty,
Yes,
and Chair Thompson.
Yes, motion carries unanimously among the four present trustees. Thank you very much for an excellent report and an exciting opportunity. I certainly hope it comes to fruition.
Thank you very much.
Moving on then to item number 7, receive a report on Bookmobile grant opportunity and provide direction to staff. Another interesting opportunity. Could you give us an overview on this one, Inga?
Sure. And in fact, I was thinking I would turn that over to Kim,
Very good.
who is our who oversees our Bookmobile program. And she and I have talked about this opportunity, or did you want me to give the overview first, Kim?
Why don't you give the overview first?
Okay.
And I'll chime in if there's questions.
Great. So the state library is offering an opportunity for libraries to apply for grants for Bookmobile services, and the funds can be used towards a brand new Bookmobile. For some communities that don't have one, it can be used for a replacement vehicle for those that already have Bookmobiles, and it can also be used for lockers, by the way, and it can be and that would be installed outside of the building where people could come up and retrieve things from the lockers without coming into the building. And it can also be used towards what they call community outreach vehicles. And those would be vehicles that could be taken more flexible in terms of where they're taken. Could be a little vehicle. Their example was these little electric vehicles that we had considered before that are kind of modified, almost as small as golf carts, but they have these, you can fold up the sides, and then there are all these books inside, and can be a hotspot. And we had considered that's something on our strategic plan to look into, because it would be good publicity for the city, and be taken to parks, and we can have pop-up libraries at unexpected places and so forth. the state is particularly interested in libraries using a vehicle as to address diversity and equity issues. And so they're particularly interested in that. And they're also particularly interested in alternative fuels. So we thought that this would be something that we should consider. And the question would be, are we interested yet in replacing our vehicle? Or are we interested in a supplemental vehicle? And in my conversations with Kim, who oversees the program, we thought that the replacement vehicle might be the more appropriate thing to apply for. And this would be an opportunity to get a smaller vehicle that to replace our existing vehicle that would be easier for staff to drive, because that has been a challenge, is we don't have a lot of people who can drive our current vehicle. Our current vehicle, as our as the person in charge of city vehicles, he said it's a large sized vehicle for a city with small streets or something like that. I mean, it's an extra wide vehicle. It's 30 feet long. The turning radius isn't very tight, and we have every year part of our maintenance budget goes towards making little repairs to when people drive over a curb or side swipe off the awning and that kind of thing. So that was what we were thinking would be the best use of it. And then just to remind you, we have $170,000 in a bequest to be used towards replacement of a bookmobile. And then the city has put aside an additional $160,000 or so to replace a vehicle. And one of the nice things about this grant is they outline the costs of different size vehicles, and a van, the kind that we were thinking of, a Sprinter van, is about, with all the things that we would need for it, about $175,000. So the other thing is that this is a matching grant opportunity. And I had thought that our matching portion, it's based on the income in your community and the size of your community. I thought our match was the 30% match, but it turns out they use a different standard for this grant than another grant I was looking at. And so our match would be 25% rather than 30%. Now, if we went with a supplemental vehicle and we were interested in the Polaris Gem kind of vehicle, that would be, when we priced it last in 2018, it was about $65,000. So that's the background.
Okay, clarifying questions before we ask for public input. Marcia.
Maybe this is a dumb question, but if we have $170,000 that we can only use to replace the bookmobile, and the bookmobile costs $175,000, are you thinking of asking them for only 5,000, or because if you can't, in other words, it seems to me there may be an opportunity here to do both, because if we have enough money to replace the bookmobile almost, and then apply for the grant for the supplemental vehicles, then we can both replace the bookmobile and the supplemental vehicles. But I'm sure you thought of that, so maybe you can answer that question.
So sorry, just to clarify, there's, let's round it down to $160,000 that the city has set aside to replace our bookmobile. And we have, to add on to that, we have money from a bequest of $170,000. So if this grant wasn't being considered and we were just talking about what's the amount of money we have available to replace our bookmobile, it's $330,000.
And we only need 175.
Right. And so the idea is, so right now we can't use the bequest to get a outreach vehicle. because
Right.
the terms of the bequest are that it must be spent on a replacement vehicle, and it's only the balance, once the bookmobile is replaced, that can be used on outreach bookmobile service.
So,
So
but
the
that-
idea would be if you used a part of the Aller Trust towards a replacement vehicle, then that would free up the balance of the trust to be used towards the bookmobile program. And that could include, if we were replacing the existing vehicle, that could include a community outreach vehicle.
right, and the Sprinter van is considered comparable. It's considered a bookmobile, so that is a legal use of trust money. Is that correct?
Right. It is a smaller vehicle, and I've watched, they have some really good videos and lots of good information in this grant website to learn about the pros and cons of different sizes of vehicles and so forth. So
But
it
this
is,
one,
it would have a smaller capacity. So
Right.
a Sprinter van holds 1,000 to 2,000 items, and our current bookmobile holds 3,000 items.
I see, but it does qualify under the terms of the bequest as a replacement for our current bookmobile.
Right, and Hans had said when we were looking at these different possibilities with the fleet management department and talking with Hans about it, he said you're not going to have multiple vehicles. You can't have a full-size bookmobile and a van. That's two vehicles that then the city has to maintain. And I said, well, what about one of these little electric vehicles that, only goes 30 miles an hour and would have to, can go on lawns and things like that. And he said that wouldn't be considered duplicative of your full-size vehicle. So that wouldn't be considered us having two bookmobiles.
So that second one, what you called supplemental vehicle would be okay. You could have a a Sprinter van and an electric one. Okay.
If I could piggyback on your question, Marcia, I'm still a little confused. So Inge, you said that your recommendation was that if we pursue the grant, it'd be for a replacement, not for a supplemental vehicle. And it seemed like this whole discussion we just had was leading in the direction of a supplemental vehicle. So I'm still confused. Could you clarify why you're not recommending a supplemental vehicle, but instead the replacement vehicle for which we already have pretty much funding available? I just don't understand.
Yeah. Thank you.
So sure. So I think the idea is when you look at what our needs are, what's the higher priority? The higher priority in general is that we're going to need to replace our bookmobile. And we do have this challenge, which is not very many people are able to drive the existing vehicle, even though it doesn't require a special license. So it seems to me in terms of allocation of time and so forth, that it's better spent on going after the bigger need before we go to the supplemental need. So the idea is why we would get grant funds to do that when we have city funds to do that. Well, it's a savings for the city if we apply some of our bequest towards the replacement vehicle to match then the city doesn't have to spend as much of its vehicle fund.
Bob, you had a comment or a question?
Yeah, when you say city money, are you talking about the Oler Fund, the 170 or 165?
No,
You're
so
talking about what the city set aside.
the general fund. from the
Okay.
city, yes.
So just making it real simple, if we have in our possession almost as much money as we need to get a 25-foot replacement vehicle, because you said it's 5 feet shorter than the 30-foot one we have now. So we're talking about replacing the old 30-foot one with a 25-footer. And we have in the Oler Fund practically every dollar we need to do that. Why? And it has sat there for years and years. And if we don't use it for that, sooner or later, if I understand it, because you sent me a copy of the bequest, they can withdraw the money and take it away if we don't use it sooner or later. So why wouldn't we use the Oler fund that is almost equal to the amount that the 25-foot replacement van would cost for it, and then decrease the amount that the city would have to spend by getting a grant for the supplemental one?
So it's a matter of timing, as I see it, which is what's the greater need? And we could not apply for the grant because, of course, that is an extra amount of labor and so forth. And instead, we could focus on using the monies that the city has set aside for a replacement vehicle and the Aller fund towards replacing our existing bookmobile service with a different bookmobile.
Yeah,
And-
but I thought we could use the grant process for the supplemental vehicle, no?
We can.
Yeah. So we would still be applying for a grant, but it would be for the $65,000 supplemental vehicle, and we'd use almost $175,000, not quite, that we have in the Oler fund to buy the bigger replacement vehicle.
So, and the match. So the match that we would need funds for the 25% match. And my thinking was we can't use the Oler fund for the match because
What's the match for? What's the match for?
The grant. The grant
Okay.
application requires a match.
Okay, we don't need the grant to buy the 25-foot Sprinter van. We practically have all the money we need for that. So if we say we want $65,000 grant, we only have to come up with 25% of that amount to match what the grant is offering, right? Which is like $16,000.
Or we apply for a grant to replace our existing vehicle. We use a portion of the Oler fund and a portion of the replacement fund for the match. And then since we've replaced the vehicle, then all of the Oler fund is freed up to use towards a supplemental vehicle and or bookmobile services.
I was under the impression that we couldn't use the Oler fund for the supplemental vehicle because it's not exactly a replacement the way the 25-foot Sprinter van would be more of a replacement.
But if
But
we
if what
use-
you said is workable,
if we used a portion of the Oler fund towards the match that's needed for the replacement vehicle, then the balance of the Oler fund, according to the terms of the bequest, can be used towards the bookmobile services. And our bookmobile division is our outreach division. And if the outreach division also wants a smaller vehicle, that would be considered part of our bookmobile services, as would be, funding for programs. We could slowly spend it towards different programs that we offer.
okay, I wasn't aware we could use 25% of the match out of the Oler fund. I thought it had to be like you use it all. So if we didn't get the grant, however, since now we have the results of your research and we know that for about the same amount of money as the Oler bequest could buy the replacement vehicle, we could still go ahead and do with that if we failed to get the grant.
And the way we purchased our previous bookmobile was we took all of the replacement fund that the city had set aside by 2008, and we had a bequest. It wasn't the Oler bequest, it was a different one. And so first we spent all of the city money that had been set aside and then supplemented it with the trust fund money.
Okay. So that's still a possibility to replace the 30-footer with a 25-footer, whether we get the grant or not.
Yes.
Okay.
And I think this is it's a good time to begin that process. The funds don't have to be fully expended if we were to get this grant until 2024, I believe. Kim can correct me if she knows off the top of her head, But because the process of speccing the vehicle and then, deciding on the wrap design and all of that can take a while.
Well, I think you're right that this is a big need, and we should be proactive and get it replaced before it collapses on us.
Okay, are there other clarifying questions before we go to public input and then discussion? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item number 7?
Yes, to make a public comment on Zoom, please raise your hand. If you are connected by phone, dial *9 to raise your hand. There are no public comments at this time, Chair Thompson.
Good. Thank you very much, Francesca. If I could start with one question,
Sure.
it sounds like we definitely need to replace the current Bookmobile at some point, maybe in the next couple of years. I don't know exactly the time frame, but in the fairly near future. But we also could consider doing both, going with a replacement vehicle and seeing if we could get a grant for the supplemental vehicle. And I wanted to explore that option a little bit further, not to negate the need to replace the current Bookmobile, but to acknowledge that and realize we may have some funding that could be used for that. This is a kind of an unusual opportunity to think about the supplemental vehicle, which we've expressed interest in before. And I was curious if you could indicate whether the city manager or assistant city manager have weighed in at all, or the fleet manager, in terms of having both of these vehicles versus just replacing the Bookmobile.
Yes, so it was the city manager who had thought that it was an interesting idea for us to get a small electric vehicle as a supplement, but this was a couple of years ago. And it was right before, as a matter of fact, right before COVID, because we had been trying to schedule a time when Rex, who runs our fleet system, and staff, at the time it was going to be Orchidia and Ellie, would go up to Santa Clara, where they have a fleet of these little electric vehicles, to take a look at them. But that didn't transpire. So at that time, the city manager thought, sure, that wouldn't be a problem to have a little electric vehicle to supplement. And our thinking was that we would help promote it as, a green initiative of the cities, and it helps sort of raise the profile of the kinds of things that the city is doing to reduce its carbon footprint and be more green and promote green practices and that sort of thing. More recently, I spoke with Nat about this grant opportunity, and he encouraged us to look at this is an opportunity to replace the full-size Bookmobile. So I've had those conversations.
Okay, other comments or discussion? Marcia.
I guess I'm still confused. It seems to me that we really could do both. And leverage, maybe ask the city if they could take some of their replacement money and apply it towards the match for the electric vehicle. As Bob pointed out, it's only $16,000. We may have a few thousand left over from the Sprinter van to apply to it. If the city has some money there. And then use the 16,000 as a match, as the grant match, and try to get one of the smaller electric vehicles. Seems to me, somebody mentioned that there's a possibility of losing the bequest if we don't spend it.
So the idea is that we can't spend it on what it wasn't
On the electric vehicle, right?
Right.
Unless we've already replaced the other one. So
exactly. I just think in terms of priorities, long-term priorities, it's a higher priority to replace the larger vehicle first.
Absolutely.
There's a whole, when you get this small, flexible, cute vehicle, you want to promote it and celebrate it and do a lot of PR around it. meanwhile, you might have your bookmobile, the full-size one, out of commission
Right.
for more and more.
It seems to me the solution you want is to allow you to get both.
Yeah.
Really, if you can get both and figure out a way to get both out of these, whichever way it works, it seems to me that you have now an opportunity to both replace the bookmobile and get a small electric vehicle in the same shot, in the same deal. So
Right.
that's what makes the most sense, I think.
So it's sort of like, we need the meat and potatoes and we need the wonderful dessert. And so here's this grant opportunity. What's the best way to try to get the meat and the potatoes and the dessert? I would say apply for the grant for the full-size vehicle. We might get it or we might not. And the match can come out of the money that the city's set aside, but a little bit should come out of the Olive Trust. And then you have your vehicle, and then you've freed up the Olive Trust to be spent on other things, rather than try to get the city to use a part of the money that they set aside to replace a full-size vehicle to be the match for the supplemental vehicle. Because I don't know that would be possible.
Right, I guess, if you don't have to disclose the fact that you've already got a lot of money towards
I think
to the grant.
I think the thing is, if the grant doesn't go through, the work hasn't been wasted, because now we have a much clearer sense of timeline and all of that, and then we can use that work towards replacing the full-size vehicle with the bequest and the monies that have been set aside in the general fund.
To follow up on that, Inga, do you have clarity about the money that's available from the equipment replacement fund, whether that's available only to replace the bookmobile, or if it could be used to, for example, as a match to get a supplemental electric vehicle?
So in my conversations before, when we have these annual meetings to discuss expenditures, sometimes you can get authorizations to loan yourself some money out of your vehicle replacement fund towards a different vehicle need. And as I'm recalling, this was something the police department needed when they put aside money for a full-size police car, but they needed to replace one of their motorcycles. So they loaned themselves some money for this alternative vehicle. But in the long run, the city really likes to use the replacement funds that were set aside for the vehicle that they were intended for.
Well, this is an interesting issue. Harish, go ahead.
So as my understanding, to summarize what Inga is saying, is that we can get the grant and still not lose the bequest, because that's important, to not lose it unnecessarily. Is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, then I don't see why we should argue about it.
Oh. But I don't think we're really there isn't really a risk in losing the Olive Trust at this point. We just hadn't, until this grant opportunity came along, we hadn't really pushed the replacement of the bookmobile up to a higher priority level. But we had always intended that it was set aside to be used for replacement.
But it had been said that we had waited so long with all our money sitting around and not really increasing in size that it became insufficient to actually replace the 30-footer. But if we are only going to get a 25-footer, now it looks like it will be virtually sufficient to replace the larger vehicle.
Well, but we didn't really have to worry about the full cost of replacement because the city also sets aside money.
Inga,
As long as our kind of intention is to use all our money to buy a replacement bookmobile all by itself, if we don't get the grant, then like Harish said, no reason not to see if the grant will supply that for us. And if it doesn't work, we now have an angle on something that we can afford to replace the 30-footer that's old and old with.
Yes, and Kim, I wonder if you want to chime in, because when you and I talked about what should we apply for, should it be the supplemental vehicle that we know we would like to have eventually, or a bookmobile? You had thought a replacement bookmobile. Do you have any more cogent way of saying why that would be the case?
I think my logic was due to needing more people and more flexibility to be able to drive, especially with our staffing situation right now.
Sure.
That there's just not very many people on the staffing roster that feel comfortable driving the large vehicle, and that it just seems like more and more problems are cropping up with the generator going out, and then they fix it, and then the generator goes out again. And then just the actual vehicle itself is starting to look a little run down with like rust and scratches and indents and missing hubcaps and stuff. And so it seemed like it's something that we should be looking at sooner rather than later.
A follow-up question. I'm still a little stuck on this question of whether to try to do both or just focus on the replacement. I think reading between the lines, I think I was hearing Inga, you suggest that trying to pursue both of them might be problematic just in terms of staff time. Did I hear that correctly?
Right, I think we should do one first and then the other.
Okay. Well, I could go either way on this, but I had leaned towards the supplemental for the grant, but I'm leaning more towards the replacement at this point. Where are others coming from at this point? Bob, you seem to have strong feelings on this. Where are you coming from?
Well, I mean, I think we are probably unanimous in saying that the priority is to replace the larger old bookmobile that we have now. And if Inga's judgment is we should try to get a grant for that, and we could still use the older money toward a replacement vehicle and services, then fine, as long as we have an internal understanding that if the grant doesn't come through, the older money will be tapped to replace the bookmobile, because now with the 25-footer as the replacement, it's within our budget, within the budget of the older grant trust.
So you would lean towards using the grant opportunity for the replacement, not the supplemental?
If we can, yeah, because I mean, the supplemental, it sounds like, you know, if we got the grant, the city would pay for that. And if we don't get the grant, then Oler can pay for pretty much all of the replacement. And we would still have access to some city money for the supplemental one, because it's not considered a replacement, it's part of outreach.
I'm not sure that we could use the replacement fund money for their supplemental vehicle.
It would actually be flip what Bob just said, which is if we don't get the grant, then we use the $160,000 the city has set aside for a replacement vehicle. We supplement it with whatever's needed from the Aller Trust. Then we've met the terms of the Aller Trust where we've replaced a vehicle, and then the balance of the Aller Trust could be applied towards a supplemental vehicle.
And that's true even if you take this trust and only use say $10,000 or $5,000 for the bookmobile, that's enough to satisfy the terms of the trust.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you're saying you could use the trust money for the supplemental vehicle if you first use some of the trust money for the replacement of the current vehicle?
Yes.
I didn't catch that. I'm sorry. Thank you for the correction, the clarification. Well, that makes me much more comfortable going with the replacement option then. Are we all?
Yeah, my sense is whatever it takes to get both It seems to me at this time makes a lot of sense. It's just like the Hathaway collection. This is a golden opportunity to leverage, I think, what we have to get both of those things that we have wanted to have for a long time.
Yeah. And if
Maybe
we-
not exactly the same time, but you know,
Yeah.
within a few months.
And if we don't, if we're not awarded a grant, the work that we've done on it isn't lost. I believe in my report, I say that it's $2.7 million that they've set aside. And we don't know how many California libraries are going to be applying for the grant.
And will
And
they be deciding who gets awarded parts of that $2.1 million? How soon will the state decide how to divvy it up?
they said they should start notifying folks in January.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good. Well, no reason not to go for it, because I think the research into it, the replacement vehicle, even if we don't get it, will be valuable when we want to go out and buy it on our own, regardless of whose money, Ohlers or cities.
Okay, are we all on the same page on at this point? Then we probably should provide some formal direction to staff, authorizing staff to pursue the grant for the replacement of the current bookmobile. Would somebody like to offer a motion?
Well, it's not an agenda item. I don't know if we can actually vote on it, but because all it says is that we're receiving a report. It doesn't even say provide direction, but I think.
It does say provide direction.
Mm-hmm.
No. Oh, wait, I'm looking at the wrong one. Sorry.
Yeah, I will make the motion that we direct staff to pursue the grant for the replacement bookmobile vehicle.
I'll be happy to second that.
Marcia made the motion and Harish seconded. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Francesca, could you call the roll?
Yes. Trustee Joshi,
Yes.
Trustee Moreau,
Yes,
Trustee Petty,
Yes.
and Chair Thompson.
Yes. The motion carries unanimously of the 4 trustees that are present. Very good. Thank you for a good discussion. Hope that goes well. Moving on to item number 8, the receiving the quarterly report on the library director's work plan. Are there any particular updates you'd like to make to that, Inga?
I think we've actually touched upon some of these in previous reports. So I would say I will not call out any in particular except one, which is just to note that with regard to the library renovation, I am part of a committee that is looking at how are we going to raise funds for, or how are we going to fund replace the improvements to the library and improvements to public safety. And at this point, we've decided that we need a study similar to the library's study on facility needs for public safety. And so that will be our next step, is asking council to authorize some funds for a study like that. Once we have a better sense of what the cost would be for public safety, then we'll go back to this idea of how can it be funded and try to work on a funding options for the council to consider for the library renovation and public safety.
And one clarifying question that I'd like to start with, just to make sure I understand. So the work with the police and fire is not focused on co-locating police and fire and library facilities, but rather on having an overall idea of what the cost would be of separate facilities, and then looking at our possible co-funding mechanisms. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement. Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification. Any other clarifications before we ask for public input? Harish.
In item 2A, this RFID is completed. What we completed is only the first phase of installation of the tags. We have not completed it. It's halfway done, right? And we are still looking at completing the automated handling.
So we had broken that down into 2 phases, and so now the next step is to look at automated, revisit
Right.
automated
I
materials.
was just pointing out that it says completed and it's not really completed.
Well, I think I had broken it into, I think it's just a terminology. I have been calling the first phase that we completed, I've been calling that RFID, because the second part of a project like this, automated materials handling, is not really an RFID project. So
Okay, any other clarifications? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public input on item number 8?
Yes, to make a public comment on Zoom, please raise your Zoom hand. If you are connected by phone, dial *9. There are no public comments.
Thank you, Francesca. Any other items of discussion or questions? I have one question, Inga. It seems to, or one comment and one question. It seems like to me like you and the library staff have gotten a lot done during the pandemic with limited staff. So congratulations and thank you. And then in terms of kind of where we go from here, if I understand correctly, probably at the December board meeting, you'll have a proposed work plan for the following year to kind of follow up on this and add to it in terms of new items. Is that correct?
that's correct. Yes.
Good, thank you. Any other comments or questions? If not, I think this is just an item for an update, so I think we can move on, if there's nothing else, to item number 9, to receive a quarterly trust fund report. Inga or Mary Jane, whichever, could one of you give a little update?
So I think I'll kind of do a quick overview, but it would be great for Mary Jane to then kind of focus in on what's been happening with fund development. So anyway, so in this report, you see basically we start off with how much revenue has been received into the trust fund, how much we've expended, and then what's the trust fund balance as of the end of September, which is the end of Q1. And then you have some charts which basically show the revenue that has come in and the expenditures out of the trust fund budget. And just a point is that, as you may recall, the way that the trust fund budget was created for approval by the city council was not the way it's normally done, because there was a series of turnover in the finance staff. And so by the time I asked, well, when do you need me to submit the trust fund budget? They said, oh, that ship's already sailed. So the trust fund budget that was approved by city council was not the budget that we had requested. And so I've done some initial corrections by asking them to add in some funds that we had planned. But as far as subtracting funds, that will happen at the mid-year adjustment. So for instance, last year, because we had so few dollars for staff, we used some trust fund monies for PTS staff. Well, this year we weren't planning to use that same amount, but nevertheless, they put it into the budget because it was in last year's budget. Another problem that came up was because they didn't ask me for any figures, they didn't get any figures for how much did we think our revenue would be. So in the budget that you and I worked on together, we thought that that we estimated that our contributions would be, sorry, I want to be on the right page. The total revenue we estimated would be $111,000, which you can see on packet page 71 in that chart, the top chart. But the city estimated $7,500. So that is another thing that will be corrected at the mid-year budget adjustment.
Okay, did you want to add anything, Mary Jane?
Not unless you have questions. My report was very brief and focused mostly on our annual fund mailing and prep for Monterey County Gives.
So
Do you want me to say something about, go ahead.
So I was thinking that we could say a little bit more about Monterey County Gives if the board
Sure.
has, yeah.
At the moment, we've just finished focusing on, have been mostly focusing on soliciting challenge gifts and on prepping the publicity and social media for the campaign once it's announced and goes public on the 11th. The last year, I think might have been the first year that the library and the Friends and Foundation did proactive solicitation of challenge gifts beyond the Friends and Foundation board and perhaps the Board of Library Trustees. I'm not sure about 2019 how that worked out because I wasn't on scene. Last year, Inga and I reached out to probably 20 some individuals, asking them if they'd step up and give challenge gifts, and we saw the number of challenge gifts go from 2019 to 2020 from 10 to 15, and the amount of money that was represented with them, with those gifts, from $9,900 to $14,275. This year we had a shot in the arm in the form of Bill W. and Diane, who met with us. I made a more expansive list of prospects for challenge gifts, which included not just people who'd given in the past, but it's been surprising to see that over the course of MC Gives, in the 2 years I've watched the November and December roll out, that there's some very generous gifts that come in out of the blue in November and December, sometimes from strangers who must have, our project must have called their interest. So we looked at some of those people who didn't give challenge gifts because of the deadline or were never aware of it, and used it as an opportunity to reach out. And instead of 20 some people, I think, I don't have a report card from Bill W. I don't ask for a report card from Bill W. But he took a big share of asks, and I think we had a list of about 50, and I think 39 people were asked. Right now, we have 19 gifts that have either shown up in the MC Gives preliminary reports that we get, as opposed to last year for the whole having 15. They seem to, I think that the staff at the Community Foundation is swamped. So I don't know, I'm very aware of some challenge gifts, present company included, that haven't appeared on my report yet. But we have expectancies in the pipeline that we are sure of 19 gifts amounting to $18,650. So, we're ratcheting up. Inga, anything else about MC Gives?
I think that's the main thing. And of course, it's never too late to make a challenge gift. We had a deadline of the 21st, but that was to be included on the website that's going to go live on November 11th. And that's the Monterey County Weekly's website that lists all the different nonprofits and what their big idea is for the year. But if a person wants to make a challenge gift, no, I'm sorry, I've got that backwards. If you made a challenge gift by the 21st, it will be in the print edition. If you make a challenge gift, but you missed the 21st deadline, then it will be on the website, but it won't be in the print edition. That makes more sense.
Oh,
And
and
then-
one more happy note. Excuse me, Inga, but I can't resist just
Yes.
saying that we got our first ever gift from Leon and Sylvia Panetta yesterday. And they're going to be among the names listed on the challenge, among the challenge gift donors. So it's not an enormous gift, but it's very generous for a first gift. It's $500. And so I just am so happy about that. They've never given to the library. I think they've never been asked.
Very good.
Sorry, Inga.
Any clarifying questions before we ask for public input? If not, Francesca,
Last year, excuse me, Jim, last year, didn't we ask Community Foundation to dispense an annual amount out of the endowment fund, maybe just the interest earned, not touching the principal? And
Right.
I assume that would go into the trust fund?
That went into the trust fund many months ago. I'm not sure exactly when, and was expended for the RFID project.
So that's why it's not in these charts that we're looking at right now.
and the board action was that was a one-time occurrence, and that unless we took similar steps in the future, that money, the investment earnings would remain in the
So from now on, they're going to roll over.
it'll in the future it'll retain in the endowment fund unless the board takes action subsequently, which we have not done. So far it was just that one-time event for the RFID project.
Okay.
Any other clarifying questions? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public input on item number 9?
Yes, to make a public comment on Zoom, please raise your hand. If you are connected by phone, dial *9. There are no public comments, Chair Thompson.
Thank you, Francesca. Any other questions or discussion? If not, I'll just thank Inga and Mary Jane for all the excellent work you're doing in the fundraising arena. And also want to make sure we publicly announce that for the non-challenge grants, the normal contributions to MC Gives, that time period is November 11th through the end of December. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so whether you're a challenge gift or not, we welcome contributions to MC Gives for the Monterey Friends and Foundation, a wonderful organization that supports Monterey Public Library, another wonderful organization.
Thank you, Jim.
Certainly.
Thank
So
you.
with that, we'll move on to informational reports and staff comments, starting with item number 10, the financial report. Any overview comments, Inga?
I have none at this time.
Okay, any clarifying questions? Seeing none, Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item number 10?
To make a public comment on Zoom, please raise your hand. Dial *9 if you are connected by phone. There are no public comments at this time.
Thank you, Francesca. Just one comment I'd make would be on under the library trust fund on the revenue on page 78. That's the number that's shown there of $5,400 in the amended budget is incorrect, as Inga previously noted on a different item. That's reflected here as far less than is actually expected in the revenue. So that I think will be corrected when the City Council approves mid-year budget amendments in February. Is that correct?
That's right.
Good. Any other comments or questions before we move on? If not, move on to item number 11, the statistical report. Anything you'd like to highlight there, Inga?
Nothing that I wanted to point out. I don't know if Kim had anything that she wanted to highlight. No? Okay, so just a reminder that we now include our current year compared to the previous year, but because the previous year was such an anomaly, we compare then the previous year to the year before that. So you can basically, if you want to know how well we're doing in a particular area, I would recommend looking at our current year and the current month and comparing it to 2019 and skipping over 2020.
Okay, thank you. Any clarifying questions? If not, Francesca, could you see if there's any public comment on item number 11?
Yes, to make a public comment on Zoom, please raise your hand. If you are connected by phone, dial *9. There are no public comments at this time.
Thank you, Francesca. Any comments or questions?
I'll just point out that, again, looking at the adult programs and going back 2 years, like Inga just suggested, even though there were 37% fewer programs this year than then, the attendance, it was only down 10%. So just as many people virtually are coming, 90% as many, even though there are only 63% as many programs. So that supports one thing that she said earlier, which was the apparent success of these remote programs as far as adults' interests are concerned.
Very good. Any other comments or questions? If not, I'd just like to add a comment that I appreciate having the September 2019 data to compare, because as Inga's pointed out, if you just look at comparing to September 20, it's not very meaningful, but having that additional prior year information makes it much more useful for comparison. So I really appreciate that. It's very helpful. And with that, I think we've completed the regular part of the agenda, and we'll move on to trustee comments. Trustee Joshi, any comments tonight?
Not today.
Trustee Mora.
No, I'll pass.
Trustee Petty.
Nothing specific, just looking forward to our next meeting and probably the one following that in the new year, where we look at what are we going to do that's not a return to normal, but a creation of a new normal with all the innovative things that we can possibly do.
Very good. And I just have two comments. One is I wanted to announce that I'm appointing today Marcia and myself to a new ad hoc committee to review the library board's policies that are in the policy manual. As most of you know, there's a suggestion or even a requirement in the policies that the board review them periodically. And so the intent of this ad hoc committee is to work with Inga on reviewing the policies and seeing if there are any particular revisions to them that we would recommend. And also we would welcome the staff's input on that to Inga, and through Inga to the ad hoc committee. So we'd welcome any staff suggestions in that regard as well. And secondly, I just wanted to make sure the public is aware that because of the Thanksgiving holiday, we won't be having a normal November meeting, and instead we'll be having a meeting in early December that I believe is December 9. Correct me if I'm wrong on that date, but I believe, anyway, it's the second Thursday after Thanksgiving, whenever that is. And if Inga, can you clarify that? Do you have it?
It looks like it's December 9.
Yes, that is the date that we've been working on. Yes.
Okay, good. So that will be our next regular meeting of the Library Board of Trustees. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank
And
you.
have a great Thanksgiving and be
Yes.
safe.
Yes,
Same to you.
Thank
Everyone.
you.
thank you. We have much to be thankful for.
You
Indeed,
do.
Yep.
especially our staff.